Warner Brothers, like you said earlier, like they were announced that they were for sale, and it's basically because it's like they are so debt ridden after their previous merger that they kind of had to do this. They kind of have to do it. All right, hey guys, Mr. Pibb is back and bolder than ever. Mr. Pibb delivers a bold kick of cherry, an intense sweet cherry flavor with hints of caramel and a lingering spicy finish. It's sweet with a bite, made for those who want more personality in their soda. Mr. Pibb is back with a bold kick of cherry, and now 35% more caffeine. Sweet cherry up front, spicy fizz on the follow. Mr. Pibb, available at a store near you. Taste a bold kick of cherry. It's the absolute best. I love Mr. Pibb. I'm so glad it's back. So go get your Mr. Pibb at a store near you. We love Mr. Pibb.
Also want to shout out Aura Frames. Aura Frames is the hidden gem that becomes the favorite gift long after the wrapping paper is gone. Listen, you guys, you got parents, you got girlfriends, you got significant others, you got sisters, brothers. They need an Aura Frame.
They need it, especially if you and I both have sisters with kids. Mm-hmm. This is a great.
It really is. It really is. So shout out Aura Frame. Share photos and videos effortlessly straight from your phone all year long. You could pre-upload those photos before it ships, and you can keep adding anywhere, anytime. The gift box is included. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag. Don't wait. Win the holidays now with Aura Frames. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code DOGWALK at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code DOGWALK. The deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Chief, here we are. Haven't done a one-on-one episode in quite a bit, I feel like. This is something that I've been keeping an eye on. I'm not going to say I'm an expert on, but this whole Warner Brothers, Netflix.
We're not really an expert on anything.
No, we're not. Sure, we're not expert on anything, but obviously we always have to disclaim that before we start an episode, because people like to get their panties in a bunch, so to speak. But this is crazy. The Paramount, Netflix, Warner Brothers merger. Obviously, just as a big fan of movies and whatnot, I've been following it from that perspective, and you've kind of been following it more from a business perspective, from what I understand.
Yeah, and a historical perspective, and this is like, it's one of those things where not all mergers and acquisitions are bad, but in general, I think there is such a thing as things can be too big to be good for the greater good. And so that's where it's like you look at these, or what are the long-term ramifications? What are the other cases in U.S. history that have been like, this is an important thing for America? And this is, Paramount's been involved in one of these before. And I do think that this is something really worth watching, especially as we're heading into this like kind of AI stage where you're just going to have more like, it's going to be a sticky, kind of tricky wicket here for all these streaming companies, because they are so big, and that's where it seems like everybody is trying to get in on live sports and media, because everything else is going to be kind of AI. So it's very fascinating time to see this going on.
Yeah, I think the biggest part here when it comes to that is that the IP in the history of established brands matters so much.
Big time.
Because if you look at the top charts, if you look at the top grossing movies, most of them are usually former things that were formerly made.
Correct.
So it's a sequel or a remake or a reboot,
everything.
Whatever you want to call it. Exactly. So that is kind of the golden ticket to really differentiating yourself in a world that could be very AI heavy.
Right. And you look at Star Wars and the DC and the Marvel stuff, like that's where all like the investment is, and that's where seemingly like all the money is. Like we've lamented many a time about how like you just don't get like those 90s, 2000s kind of small budget comedies anymore, because the studios are like, what's the point of having a project that only makes $30 million? Yeah. You know?
Yeah. So let's kind of start at the top, I guess. So the way I understand it is Warner Brothers announced they were looking for a buyer. They were looking to be sold. A couple companies rose to the top to put a bid in and try to buy Warner Brothers, one of whom was Netflix, the other whom was Paramount, and I believe at one point Comcast was also in the mix to a degree.
Yep.
And last we've heard, also, we were recording a couple days early here because I have to go out of town to St. Louis, so this is what we know right now as of Tuesday morning. They agreed to be purchased by Netflix. So
$82 billion purchase at like roughly $27 a share.
So looks like it's kind of all signed, sealed, and delivered. Paramount comes over the top after they didn't get it, and they're like,
Yeah.
not on our watch.
Larry Ellison and Paramount, who like he just bought CBS, recently, so Viacom, and yeah, like it is an arms race here. So and they're going for it. So what was it about this that really got your interest going?
So obviously I was very locked into the Paramount UFC deal, which I know is different.
Yeah,
that was just a rights thing where they snagged the rights from ESPN.
But it's part of this too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But it's so Skydance. I believe Skydance bought Paramount. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so that's their new operating arm. And then they bought UFC, which was really groundbreaking and revolutionary because it's kind of killed the pay-per-view model.
Yeah.
Which has been in existence for a long time.
The whole time.
Yeah, exactly. Like WWE switched away from it when they went to WWE Network and Peacock, and now obviously they're on Netflix. And I think their pay-per-views are shown on there too, or they're shown somewhere. Regardless, it's not pay-per-view anymore. But knowing that UFC is going to be on, Channel 2, CBS soon,
crazy.
It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
To know that I could watch Jon Jones or Conor McGregor on basic cable.
Right.
And I know a lot of them will be on Paramount Plus, but
still,
that was the first thing where I was like, oh, damn, Paramount's like they're
making moves.
Yeah, they're making moves. And from what I understood about Paramount forever is they were kind of struggling. Like they were not doing well. There was a lot of issues over there. So it seems like Skydance has really kind of put a little fresh breath of air.
A different strategy.
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
And they've bought up a lot of the soccer live sports rights for these different leagues across the world, and it's like everybody is trying to get into those.
Exactly.
Spaces. Yeah.
And the main reason why I was interested in it, and I'll be honest, I'll come up front, and listen, you could have your opinions about the behind-the-scenes characters, and I don't really know about that. I'm sure we're going to get into that. But the main reason why it garnered so much of my attention is because the Netflix CEO has been very outspoken about wanting all movies to be on streaming.
Yeah.
Which means in turn, I've talked a lot about it on the show, how much I love going to the movies. The guy doesn't want movie theaters to exist.
Which is...
sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's like a great experience.
It is. And I honestly, I wanted to get your take on that, being as a guy who I'd say you're a pretty casual, not even casual. I'd say what would you say you are? You saw Oppenheimer in theaters.
Yeah, I would say I typically...
How many a year?
In a given year, I'd probably go 3 to 4 times.
Okay. That's
probably closer to 3 on average. Yeah.
And it's obviously very movie dependent. What's out?
Correct.
What you want to see.
Yeah.
What have you seen this year?
I think this year is low. I'm struggling to remember a single movie I saw in the theater.
Okay. All right. No, that makes sense. So that's why
I had grand intentions of seeing the Leo movie and like some of these other ones, and I just never made it happen.
You should have. It's really fucking good.
I've heard.
You should go see Marty Supreme. It comes out Christmas too. That's good too. But regardless, that's why I'm kind of interested as well. I don't know if I'm in a bubble because a lot of people I follow were kind of banging the drum like this is fucking horrible for people who like to go to the movies. Like this guy said Oppenheimer and Barbie were just as good on your couch as it is in a theater. I believe you said that.
I think there's some movies where that's true. I've watched Oppenheimer on my couch, and I've watched it on the big screen. Now, look, I saw it at a theater where I was largely uncomfortable, so it wasn't that great. But the viewing experience, just your eyeballs, if I had seen it in like a traditional, like more modern theater, it would have been sensational on the big screen. So I do think like there is something to be said for the big, the comfy chairs, the huge screen, the Dolby surround sound, and the movie going experience is still great.
Yeah, and I'd argue, I get in this argument all the time with one of my friends. He's always like, oh, you don't need to see that in the theaters. You don't need to see that in the theaters. Listen, every single movie is enhanced in the theaters as long as you're not with a shitty audience.
Yeah.
Granted, don't get me wrong. If you want to be like, I don't really need an enhanced experience for this movie, sure. But I think I'm confident you could say every experience is enhanced if you see it in a theater.
Yeah, okay. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if it's like a great story where there's not a lot of action, like the classic one I think of is like, they're older movies, but like Shawshank or A Few Good Men or something like that, where it's just like heavy dialogue. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think you need that in a theater, but if you're seeing Twister or Independence Day or Oppenheimer, something like that, Like you want the Batman movies.
I get it. I get what you're saying, but my argument is even those Shawshanks are enhanced by a theater experience, but you may not need them. You may decide like, all right, well, I don't really need.
Yeah.
You can't measure the percentage, even if it's just marginally better.
Yeah, I could see it. I would listen to that argument.
Yes, because he always argues like, oh, like horror movie, you don't need to see it. I was like, dude, I totally disagree.
Yeah.
To be on edge in a theater with a bunch of other people that's completely pitch black.
Yeah.
There's just shit you can't control, but whatever. We don't got to get into that debate.
And I understand that that's Netflix's CEO's position right now because that's his business. But who's to say that in 2 years Netflix won't go and buy AMC? And be like, now we are in the theater business. So now we have a production company, we have a streaming company, and we have like the theater experience too. And then they'll be singing a different tune.
I wish, but he's been pretty hell-bent on the same message of...
Yeah, but it could be different leadership. It could be, there's still money to be made in the theater experience.
Definitely.
I mean, we've seen it.
Yeah.
So I know like the AMC is one of those like stocks that people...
Yeah, turned into a meme stock for a little bit.
Correct. Yeah, but if that doesn't... And they obviously struggled during COVID. But this is like... I do think... And it's the same thing with like why a lot of these sports franchise valuations go through the roof because as we get more and more digital and more kind of, people don't go to the office as much anymore. I do think people still want in-person experiences, whatever that may be. And I think going to the movies is part of that equation. And I don't think it's an impossible thing to envision a scenario in the next decade where Netflix decides that, hey, actually the theater business would be good for us. Let's roll that up too.
Listen, I would love that.
I don't know that I would love that, but I think that I could envision a scenario where Netflix takes that
where they switch position.
Yeah.
I would love that, but obviously that Ted Leontios is, I believe, his name, the CEO of Netflix.
Yeah,
he has not budged from his position. Yeah. He wants these movies to be in theaters for as little time as possible. Mm-hmm. If it's a director or if it's a production company who demands a theatrical release, he will be like, all right, you get 2 weekends or whatever it is, and then he tries to snatch it out so people watch it at home. Obviously, I fucking hate that. That makes me terrified, especially with all the property WB has. Like, could you imagine a world where a Batman movie can only be seen from your couch? That sucks to me.
That sucks. And it's like I remember when Dark Knight was being filmed here, and like you would see it like you would have the things on Lower Wacker and the different car chases and like, oh, these streets are shut down for this. There was like an anticipation to go see that in the theater, and it was fucking awesome. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure everybody has seen it since on TV or whatever. It's not the same experience.
No.
It's not even close. So I hope that there's not some angle with this to kill that experience. But it could be, like I said, I could see a situation where they're bundling all this up to drive down the price of the theaters, and then they snatch up the theaters at 50% of what it costs today, and then they make a push to make that more profitable.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, listen, anything's on the table. You know, like if you're not trying to, revolutionize your business, you're kind of falling behind, is what they say, right? And that's kind of what they did, and they fucking put Blockbuster 10 feet under.
Can I tell you another thing that just irks me about this whole Netflix thing?
What's that?
Netflix specifically.
Yeah.
Where it's like they are kind of crying poor and they really crack down on sharing passwords or whatever. And I think that, there's some validity to that. But don't sit there and cry poor and then be like, oh, yeah, we got $82 billion to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. Like, do you have the cash on hand or not?
Yeah, but Chief, you know what, cash on hand is not as valuable as subscribers used.
I understand, but it's like there's got to be some kind of middle ground, and there just doesn't ever seem to be. Like I do think, and this is kind of like the larger point, where it's like I think our economy is just too financialized. I'm tired of everyone in the country being squeezed all the time for everything. And I do think that a lack of competition in many industries leads to price gouging and wage suppression directly. And this is where people will be like lib chief or whatever. But like this is like a tale as old as America, where things kind of ebb and flow. And then you get like a Teddy Roosevelt in, and he breaks up all these monopolies and creates competition, and it lowers prices and increases wages, which I think is good for the country as a whole, as opposed to Wall Street and the CEOs.
Yeah, no, I get it. And let me give my one other concern too, and then we could get into kind of the minutia of the deal, so to speak.
Yeah.
What do you view as the most quality streaming service?
I have them all, which is another problem, I would say, because it's like you have the Disney bundle, which is Hulu, ESPN, and Disney. So I have all those.
I guess from a TV perspective, like what network?
Which one do I watch the most? I would say the highest quality shows still are on HBO Max.
So Netflix would be acquiring them.
Yes, which they already have a deal. They did a deal with HBO prior to this where they licensed a bunch of those franchises. So like Band of Brothers is on there. Like all of those kind of older HBO shows are now available on Netflix too.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like licensing deals or whatever.
Yeah. But I think that that was probably a precursor for this.
I would be very concerned about the quality of HBO because HBO is still means something.
Yeah.
Like I'm watching a show because it's on HBO.
It has a level of credibility.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not saying all Netflix shows are bad. Clearly, I'm fucking sing the praises of Stranger Things. I think Netflix has done a fantastic job with that, but there's just something a little different with HBO.
But it's like, think about what are the top Netflix shows?
Of all time?
Yeah.
Probably House of Cards, Stranger Things.
Yeah.
I would assume, it was early on, but I assume Orange is the New Black is probably up there.
Yeah.
I assume Ozark's up there.
Yeah.
Am I missing any big ones?
But it's like Peaky Blinders, but that's really BBC, and then they, is that a strict licensing deal? Because I think they are also owning and operating and, doing that here as well. Like
Squid Game,
yeah. So like Netflix does a good job with programming too, but I think they do great documentaries. I've been watching the Diddy one too, which I don't know if you've seen any of that.
I've not.
It's fucking wild, and this is an aside. It makes me love 50 Cent so much. Like he's the executive producer on that, and I heard a story where he was doing a media circuit. And he specifically asked to do one on ABC because he knew Diddy could see that one in jail. So like he's just like the most spiteful, funniest guy of all time. And he's been right about everything. And it's a wild documentary. It's very well done. So that's another Netflix one.
I got to watch it. And I think that's something that Netflix does generally a good job on.
Yeah.
Is those things.
Yeah.
I watch the shit out of all those.
But my problem is, and my concern is, I don't necessarily know that the quality will drop. I think that's definitely possible, but I bet you the prices go up because if you're looking at the general population, everyone's struggling and everyone's in debt, and you're like, we have them all, as we've talked about. I don't know how many people have them all. I think a lot of people have like a handful. But if you're competing against 12 streaming platforms, and it's like you're making people choose. And it's like, you better have good programming. You better have a competitive price. You better have all this. Well, if that goes from 12 to 4, then it's like, well, people might, instead of paying, $18 for Netflix and $12 for Paramount and whatever for HBO Max, $20 for HBO Max, if you get them all for one, if they're all under the same umbrella, you can raise the price and lower the quality and you can even put less content out because you're all under the same umbrella and charge people, a higher price to make up the difference for this $82 billion.
Hey guys, let's pause to talk about Blue Chew. Fellas, you already know what time it is. It's time to level up, and Blue Chew just dropped something crazy. I'm talking next level championship belt gold-plated energy. Blue Chew Gold is the newest innovation for the #1 chewable ED brand. This ain't your grandpa's little blue pill. This is the 4-in-1 beast that's setting the gold standard for performance. We're talking 2 ingredients for blood flow to keep that rocket pumping, mixed with apomorphine and oxytocin to turn up the arousal and connection in your brain and body. Blue Chew Gold dissolves under your tongue and works in as little as 15 minutes. That means you can get it on quicker and stay in the game longer. Elevation without hesitation. This is peak passion and peak performance in a single tablet. If your bed could talk after this, it'd be asking for a break. Make life easier by getting harder and discover your options at BlueChew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month of Blue Chew Gold with code DOGWALK. That's promo code DOGWALK. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. Also, part of My Cheesesteak. Part of My Cheesesteak has teamed up with Penn Station East Coast Subs to offer a new cheesesteak that raises the bar even higher for cheesesteak lovers. Introducing the Mega Cheesesteak. It's a limited time offer for this football season. It's a one-of-a-kind sub built with a mega portion of steak, pepperoni, provolone, and American cheeses, sauteed onions, mushrooms, banana peppers, and mayo. Go check that out. Penn Station is 320 locations, give or take, and you can go grab that there. Penn Station Subs is the only place where fans can get the Mega Cheesesteak. Order it in store, online, or through the Penn Station app for delivery. All right, Chief, so let's kind of get into that minutia of the deal, so to speak.
Okay. So like we said, there was the precursor for this. So Warner Brothers, when they merged with Discovery, they took on a ton of debt. So like they need a cash injection, and that's kind of where the interesting part of the Paramount coming over the top. So it was a reported like $82.6 billion offer from Netflix for Warner Brothers. Paramount comes over the top with a $30 per share, but it's all cash. So they're paying it's like $100 billion in cash to get this whole library of information. And that is attractive to the Warner Brothers shareholders because they need the money, which is why they licensed a bunch of those shows in the last couple of years, because then they could recoup some money, get this cash injection without having to raise prices. Netflix, it makes sense for them because they increase their library without having to like invest in production costs. So it's like they get content for just like the overhead of it's a proven commodity because people do watch and like those shows, and they don't have to be like, all right, we got to hire actors, we got to hire, production studio space, we got to do the editing, all the things that goes into making a show. Well, they get to skip all of that and just have these titles in their library with their reach. So it's like the licensing thing was kind of a win-win for both. But it's still Warner Brothers, like you said earlier, like they were announced that they were for sale, and it's basically because it's like they are so debt-ridden after their previous merger that they kind of had to do this. They kind of have to do it. So that's a big part of the issue, and we've seen other platforms bundle, like we talked about the Disney, Hulu, ESPN bundle. This is going to be like another effective, like you're bundling it if you're going to have Max and HBO. The part that doesn't make sense for me, and maybe it doesn't, maybe I'm missing something, but it's like one of the reported things is, well, then if you can't beat Netflix's audience reach, like they are still the biggest platform. So the theory is like, oh, like if you get more people exposed to HBO shows, then you will in turn potentially, it's like an advertising thing, like you'll get more HBO Max subscribers. But it's like, does their subscription model even matter anymore if they're just rolled up into Netflix? So we'll see how that actually plays out. But they're, with this deal, they're going to have, they're going to have Veep, Silicon Valley, they're going to have the DC library. They're also going to have all the old Warner Brothers films, which is an immense catalog, now is going to be part of that Netflix library. Mm-hmm. So that is the angle, and it is, like we said, there is this arms race going on because you have Amazon has their own production studio, their own streaming thing, like they're trying to grow that. Apple has theirs, like Peak NBC Universal has theirs. Mm-hmm. Like everybody is doing this, and eventually it's just like we said, you had 12 whatever platforms in addition to all the other content. You could call it YouTube, you can call it cable, excuse me, live sports, and it's like they're all kind of buying each other and consolidating down, which dwindles the competition, which makes it a lot easier for these big companies to then strong arm consumers and control the content and do whatever they can. They kind of have carte blanche to do whatever they want because they're not threatened by as much competition.
And where does the antitrust laws come into play here?
So that's the big question. And this is a thing with the Trump administration versus the last, the Biden administration. The old head of the FTC was this woman named Lena Khan. And Lena Khan is the youngest head of the FTC ever. So she was born in 89. So she's still only 36 years old. So she was even younger than that, obviously, when she had that position. And she kind of had like an old school, almost like a Roosevelt era look at how to use the Sherman Act, which is Sherman Antitrust Act, because this is kind of what I'm talking about. Because if you don't have this has like major potential ripple effects, not just for consumers but for employment too. Because it's like if Netflix and these other platforms don't feel the pressure to create as much content, then you do need less editors, you need less actors, you need less everything, because you already have a massive library. So it's like you can really consolidate and not have to have as much overhead if you just buy the different titles that are already in existence outright. So then it's like there's a trickle-down effect of these policies, and then it's like there is, like we said, less competition, so the consumer ultimately gets squeezed as well. And we've seen this so many times throughout history, and there's this is a big problem kind of like across the board in America. So you used to have like 12 airlines, now you really only have 4. 80% of meat in America is produced by one of 4 companies. There's really only 2 agriculture companies left. So that and they've done so much. The agriculture one is like a fascinating thing too. So when you're driving through middle America and you see these corn and soy fields, just, if you go through Iowa and Nebraska, as far as the eye can see, right? Traditionally with farmers, you harvest your crop and you keep however many seeds for next year to do your planting it, and then you do the same thing over and over again. Well, somewhere along the way, Monsanto and these other big agriculture, ConAgra, all these big companies, through genetic modification and all these different things, they were able to basically have intellectual property on seeds. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now if a farmer keeps his seeds, like he has to actually buy seeds every year, because otherwise they can be sued. Like, oh, you're using our intellectual property, which they were granted a patent on fucking seeds, which have been around forever.
Yeah, we did an episode on that, I believe.
Oh, did we? Okay. Yeah. So like that to me is like so counterintuitive and wrong. Like if you want to sell it to them once, like you got your nut on that, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's also, there's all sorts of other problems with that, but it's like, this is where like the antitrust thing is a big problem, because if you just don't have options as a consumer, whether you're a farmer or a guy on your couch watching Netflix, well, then you are at their kind of whim, because they don't have to compete. And this is like one of the reasons why Teddy Roosevelt is, he was a Republican, and a Republican in many ways, but he was really kind of a progressive too. Like he was, if you heard of Standard Oil and the Rockefellers, right? You never heard of the Rockefeller family?
Of course, I've heard. Yeah. Yes.
So they made all.
This was like a thing.
This is a thing.
Yeah.
So Standard Oil. This goes way back, but you've heard of, like, remember the old Hartford Whalers? Mm-hmm. Okay, so Hartford Whalers. Well, whaling was an industry that kind of disappeared in like a span of like 5 years. It went from being, because this was like where we light our lamps with whale oil and different, and that was a huge industry, to then it went from that to kerosene, okay, because they discovered a way to do that. And that company, and then the Rockefellers, and you see like the old Texas, not No Country for Old Men, what's the Daniel Day-Lewis one?
Oh fuck,
you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Where you've seen like the old, like the oil guys, right?
Yeah.
The prospectors.
It's not gangs.
No, it's not gangs in New York. It's like, I've abandoned my child. Yeah. What's that one?
I don't know.
Anyways, but like striking oil was like a big business in that time frame. And it was in Pittsburgh. It was in there was a one point where Ohio was like the Saudi Arabia of that era, where they had so much oil and they tapped it all out. Then it became Texas and Mexico and all these other, Oklahoma, all these other places. But there was a lot of risk involved because either you strike gold, black gold, or you completely wipe yourself out because you invested all this money in oil drilling for something that just wasn't there underground.
There will be blood.
There will be blood. Thank you. And so the Rockefellers, they didn't really do any of the prospecting. They were just the refiner. Right? John D. Rockefeller was just he did the refinery. And that became such a huge business. And they called it Standard Oil because their competitors at the time, kerosene was like a very flammable. So there's fires going on all over the place. So he came up with a good system. So they had a monopoly on a very vital industry, and it got to the point where it was like this is not good for anyone basically besides Rockefeller, because he controlled everything and he had so much wealth and so much power. And there was like they had, back then they didn't have direct elections for senators. Okay. So it used to be, the old joke was, every senator in America is for sale because they were just kind of appointed through Congress. Every senator and every person in America was for sale, except for the ones from Pennsylvania because they belonged to Rockefeller. Okay, so like he couldn't buy those; he had too much money. So it impacted all sorts of different aspects of American life and American business, and eventually they started to use this Sherman Trust Act, where they had to call John D. Rockefeller in. They brought him, in front of the Antitrust, and this was like Roosevelt was really the one pushing this in his administration. And what happened was they took Standard Oil and they broke it up into 34 smaller companies. And so that out of that, Exxon was born, Mobil Oil was born, Chevron was born. They were all used to be Standard Oil, and they all became these different companies. And as result of that, there was more competition, prices dropped, and it became better for people like you and me. And this has been like a big talking point, really, I want to say kind of since COVID, how unaffordable everything is. So affordability is like a real problem. Interest is through the roof, prices are through the roof, and it's like people are getting squeezed. And it's like, I don't think it's crazy to say that some of these effective monopolies, where if you have Tyson and like 3 other producers control 80% of the meat production in the United States, well, that they have the ability to raise prices on McDonald's and everybody else and grocery stores, and then that all trickles down to the consumer, where you used to have $1, and there's a myriad of factors that go into this, but this is a big one. And because if you just don't have people being like, I know I can do this business at a lower rate and charge less and then undercut the big boys, then they can just do whatever they want, and that's what they've been doing. And this is like and then you look at other kind of like famous antitrust cases. Do you ever remember your parents telling you about like, oh, we can't do, like, don't do a long distance call?
Yeah.
Okay, like that was the thing when I was a kid. Oh, long distance calls. Well, that was because like AT&T and Bell really controlled that entire industry. So eventually they had to break up the telecommunications companies, and what happened out of that was tremendous innovation, because it's like, we got to find other ways to make money. And then so they invested in wireless technology, and so you had all these other cell phone companies kind of come up, and like the industry changed forever. But if there was no motivation to have innovation, because why would we want to invent a product that competes with our core business of wired communication? We can just charge them an arm and a leg for long distance calls. Then we don't have to do that. So like when they break it up, there is some benefits, and it comes from competition and the fight for market share, which usually involves lower prices. So that's why these antitrust things are so important. Like you can't have true capitalism in a monopolistic industry. And that woman Lena Khan, the old head of the FTC, who got replaced by Trump, she really was kind of a dog on a bone for this type of thing. She took she was proposing lawsuits under antitrust against Amazon. She was proposing it against all the big social media companies. You know, because she's like, I don't know if Meta should be able to own Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and have this much power in our society. And that could be, you know, that could take place in many different ways. It could be, you know, through, you know, consumer protection, but it also is just like, should they get to decide what free speech is? Now, I don't think that was necessarily her angle, but if you have that much power and that much power on your platform, like that's a big thing. She did the same thing with Google and YouTube. Like Google has 90% of the market share for search. Do they also need to have YouTube as well? You know, so it's like these are such huge companies that have so much power that it doesn't necessarily have to impact Americans just on price. And it's like the same thing with the airlines. Like air travel has always been expensive, but it's gotten more expensive because you have 4 carriers have 80% of the passenger traffic in the United States. So it's Delta, United, American, and Southwest have 80%. So if you're only having really to compete with them, then it's like your options as a consumer are very limited. Yep. And then they don't have to have all the same. They can like, oh, we're all charging you for bags now. We're all charging you for peanuts and everything, right? So not peanuts, because
buy a seat, everything like that.
All the things, because they're not worried about like, oh, well, I'll just go over to, you know, and that was kind of Southwest's thing. Like, we're going to find a way to do it for cheaper. And that's why I love that CEO of the Ryanair guy, because he's a lunatic. He's like, I'm just going to, maybe we'll have flights without bathrooms. Maybe we'll have flights without seats. And we'll just find ways where it's like, I can increase how much revenue we're generating without passing that cost onto the consumer, so then he can undercut these big guys. And we've seen Ryanair went from like a small Irish regional airport to a pretty good sized international airline. And it's the same thing with banks. You know, like everything has just become so big and so financialized that, and you know, so you know, we talk about the business people, and I was talking to one of our sales guys about this episode beforehand, and it's like when you have these monster companies, like they're just not incentivized to really to challenge each other. And I was making a point. What was I just saying to that guy? And then it's like the same thing with Ticketmaster too. Like if you have the full market share, you can just do whatever you want. And it's almost like, you know, at some point that's just not good for America. If it's not good for the economy, it's only really good for Wall Street.
So now, is there possible antitrust for both sides, though? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, they would just block the deal.
Yeah.
They could, in theory, just block the deal. And the deal's not done. Like Paramount, because it is all cash, it's $100 billion or whatever in cash to buy Warner Brothers. They have to have shareholder approval. Now, I don't know if that'll be that difficult or not. But, you know, you get more and more things like this where it's like, where is the money to be made? And you just have these, you know, these big investment banks that just go and kind of buy up and then finance everything.
And that's where the term hostile takeover is being thrown out there a lot?
So the hostile takeover is just, that happens with public companies, because if you have like a deal in place with Netflix and it's a publicly traded company and you're, hey, we're doing it at $27 a share, well, I'll give you $30 a share. And so it's like, we're buying it up. So like you don't have a choice necessarily. That's the hostile takeover part.
Because from what I understand, it was basically the management of WB was like, we want to sell to Netflix. We think that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then it's just the board could sit there and the shareholders be like, wait a second.
Yeah, you're leaving $20 billion on the table.
We want to override that.
Correct.
We want to go with Paramount.
Correct.
And that's where a lot of people think. Is there some, I don't know if it's true or not, but is there some like tinfoil hat stuff going on here? It seems like there's some people with the Trump administration involved too, right?
Yeah, I mean,
or there's like Saudis, and I don't really know. That's what I'm trying to
figure like out. This is one of those things where it's like Trump, he says they're not friends, but they have a long, like Trump and Larry Ellison have a long history together. So if it's some other company, maybe you step in, and he's made a couple comments about it. But if it's Trump, if it's some other company that Trump has no relationship with, and it's like, hey, like we think this is a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, maybe him and his administration look the other way if it's his friend and Larry Ellison with Paramount, you know, CBS being like, yeah, whatever, let that deal go through. You know, like, so that would be like a potential I don't know if you want to call it a conflict of interest or you're looking the other way, but it's like there's no way this would have got done with Lena Khan. And I don't want to demonize all mergers and acquisitions. Like some of them make sense and they're good and they're good for everybody, but it does become a point where if you have all these de facto monopolies across every single sector that matters, pharma, agriculture, meat processing, big tech, microchip processing, and it becomes, because you could a pure capitalist would probably say like, well, you just need investment to get in and then you can undercut them. But if this is what Microsoft would do back in the 90s, where they would find a competitor who's starting up, like, we'll just buy you up, and then you shut it down or you stick it in a drawer and like you don't have to compete with them. Like that happens all the time. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing with US Steel. It was the thing with Alcoa, who's a big aluminum manufacturer, and you're probably going to see it with these AI companies at some point too, because like the AI thing is seeming like more and more of a bubble, and like we had like the .com bubble burst at the end of the 90s. Like reportedly OpenAI has like insane debt, right? So at some point, like the money you have to start making money. And if you're not making money, then that opens like, does Google just step in and buy OpenAI? Because Google's got a ton of money and they're lagging behind a little bit with their own AI, so they could just snatch that up, and then now Google's got another thing. Yeah. Or Amazon or whoever. So it's like at some point you might just have an economy that's based on 12 companies and like 20 guys. Like I don't think that is a healthy way to have an economy. But if you were to say like, hey, we're going to break up Google and YouTube, we're going to break up Meta, and we're going to force all these different companies in all these different sectors to compete in different ways. Because then if it's like, if there's only 4 of them, and they're especially in tech where it's like they have AI, they have different social media platforms, they have different search platforms, where it's like, all right, we won't compete with you here, you don't compete with us there, and it's all just kind of like handshake deals, and then the average citizen gets screwed. But that's where it was like, you like Standard Oil, you could not get into the oil business back in the day. Like you couldn't do it. And Rockefeller did that too, where he would just buy up any potential competition. We saw that, and we saw another thing with the railroads too. Like that was a big thing back in the day. So they would just, anybody who's like quasi competing or a quasi competitor, we got cash, we'll just buy you out, and then you become part of Standard Oil. So when they broke up Standard Oil into 34 different companies, that's how you inject more competition into the marketplace, because you couldn't just start a company. You couldn't just start an oil company and genuinely compete. So you had to break up the big boys into these other companies. And all 34 of those different companies, when the dust settles, they all have to compete with each other. Now, over the course of 100 years, those oil companies have all, because Exxon and Mobil were 2 different companies for forever. Now it's ExxonMobil. Mm-hmm. And it's like, then they get, then BP is in with people, and now it's consolidated back down. It's almost like you need to revisit this every 50, 100 years in these different industries, so you maintain this competition, because it's just too much. And you see like the power that these private equity firms have, where it's like it's Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock. They kind of own, like, those 3 are the biggest shareholder. Now you could, and it's only like 3-4%, but their voting block is so significant that they own basically every Fortune 500 company. So like when you boil it all down, they're the ones that are like, they're behind kind of all of these deals, and they're the big voting block. So when it's like, oh, Paramount has to go to their shareholders. Well, if you and I have $1,000 worth of their stock, and State Street has, and we're opposed to it, and State Street owns hundreds of millions of dollars worth of their stock, like they win. Okay, so it's like it's just like the average citizen just cannot compete and succeed in a marketplace where there is just domination by a few banks and several big companies, and that's it.
I think that didn't I think AB tried to buy Miller, and that got blocked, right?
That got blocked because they like AB and InBev merged probably 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was like all of those got rolled up. You can make there's alcohol distribution. There used to be a ton of regional ones, and then it all there's kind of like three. Okay, so prices, like, you can just roll up prices, and it is good in general for those companies and their big shareholders because you're limiting overhead and you're limiting competition. It is not good for, in my opinion, for the country at large. And that's why you see, like, you're worried as a consumer about does the HBO brand and the quality of programming that I'm paying for take a hit with this deal? It may or it may not, but the odds that it does certainly goes up with this deal because they don't have to necessarily create as much and invest and really have great writers and all these things that go into making a great TV show. They're not as incentivized to put out new stuff as they were before because they just have a different catalog, and they're not, or if there's a great script out there, because that used to be, if anyone who's watched Entourage is like, oh, somebody has a great script. Oh, we got this one from Warner Brothers, this one from, Universal, Paramount, whatever. They're all bidding for the same script because they want to make the same movie because they can make a shit ton of money. But if it's like, if you only have two potential buyers, and it's like, you guys have this one, we'll take the next one. Mm-hmm. And you can just have handshake kind of deals, backroom deals. And then everybody else besides Wall Street and those companies ends up losing.
Yeah, and just looking it up too, you bringing that up, 3 of my top 5 movies this year were Warner Brothers movies.
Yeah.
They had a big year, dude.
Yeah.
They made some awesome things. And what's interesting, some of their great stuff didn't even make that much money. Like One Battle After Another didn't do that well. Mm-hmm. But then they had some surprise hits, like Weapons was a Sinners. Like there were some big movies that they put out that did really well. Like Mickey 17 didn't do great, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some concern with that for sure. Like they're bangers they put out this year.
Yeah.
I just hope it doesn't. That's my concern.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair concern. In addition to they can charge you more for less.
Yeah,
and that's like the whole thing where it's like you can have dominance is not like market dominance and market share does not mean like you're providing the best product or you're the most efficient. It's just like it in a way it's a sign of like market failure because you want to have a ton of people playing in the market and being able to compete genuinely. And if there's just so much money rolled up into 2, 3, 4, 5 companies, then you're just naturally like, you're just not going to get that as a consumer.
Yeah.
So scale is not always good. And it's certainly not always good for, the consumer. It's not necessarily always good for shareholders either.
That's what I'm confused by too, is how do you make your money back on this? Disney just bought 21st Century Fox for $71 billion in 2019.
Yeah.
And that includes Star Wars and Marvel.
Yeah.
Those are 2 cash cows.
Monsters.
So
yeah.
it's like it's just so much money.
And I can't remember where I heard this, but I thought it was a very good point. Where did I wish I could say where I heard it, but it was like I was listening to like an economics podcast somewhere. And they're talking about how, like, you always get preached with, like, hey, like, nothing is more certain or sure over the long haul than basically real estate and the stock market. Oh, if you you're growing at 9% a year if you put your money in the stock market. And this is like, we could all, in theory, benefit from the stock market. So that is the thing where it's like, if everyone's putting their money in the stock market through 401ks or whatever, because that's like the safest place, and that goes up 9% a year, but prices for everything across the board go up 9% or more, you're actually, as a person, you're losing money and purchasing power because your dollar just doesn't go as far. So it's good for Wall Street, but it's not good for, it's like the old cliche, Wall Street versus Main Street, but it's true. Mm-hmm. And it's like we've had really since Reagan, everything has really been towards the benefit of Wall Street, and maybe even a little bit before that with Nixon too, where it's just like we've stripped out all our manufacturing, we've really prioritized banking, and we've deregulated so much that we've allowed all these huge mergers to happen and acquisitions to happen, that it like the people who actually get screwed on these things are typically the people. You know,
Classic.
You're right. So it's just that to me is not a good thing. It's one of those kind of sticking points that I have where it's just like I think competition and capitalism is good. I don't think what we necessarily have right now is like a good form of capitalism.
Yeah.
So
I get you.
Yeah.
Well, it will be interesting to see how this shakes out. Like I said, we
Yeah.
recorded this Tuesday morning. A little early, I know, but just with travel schedules and whatnot, this is when we had to do it. But we'll be watching to see what happens for sure.
Yeah.
All right, then. Thanks, Chief. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for watching. We will see you guys for the draft on Tuesday.